Why did I think this was a good idea? Alright, so welcome back to another review. So I was flipping through Amazon's Prime Day sales, and I was just browsing for pretty much anything that I could want or need. Then I find these bad boys, the Beats Solo 4, for only 120 bucks. So I said I could use a new pair of workout headphones, and I was genuinely curious to see if this new iteration of the Solos got any better. So today I am going over my impressions of the Beats Solo 4. Don't forget to do the thing down below, and let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. So right off the bat, you're gonna notice this packaging is a little different than usual. Now they're using this recycled packaging, which, while I applaud, makes them look like a fake Beats product, and we know there are plenty of those in the world. I had to pop online and see what the box on an authentic pair looks like. Sure enough, these are the real deal, so this is an authentic Beats product, unfortunately. So open the package and you'll see the headphones in this soft shell case that was actually pretty nice. I do like it. Within the case, you'll see the headphones themselves, a USB-C to USB-C cable for charging, which is great, finally, USB-C. A 3.5 to 3.5 millimeter cable, which for all intents and purposes is an aux cable, the quick start guide, and 2 Beats stickers. Yay. To be fair, that's pretty much anything you'd need when it comes to using these in both wireless and wired mode, except for, you know, a 3.5 millimeter to USB-C dongle or lightning dongle to use them wired on a phone. So let's jump right into the build quality here. It's atrocious as usual, unfortunately. If Beats didn't have as much brand recognition, people wouldn't buy these whatsoever for the price. The vast majority of this headphone is made of plastic, a really cheap feeling plastic. Listen to this. Now, it may deceive you at first, because I'll give them that, you know, it's a very smooth and streamlined look. Beats came up with a really nice looking headphone that actually does blend well into your head. It definitely won't stick out in public and make you look like the headphones guy. But sit on them by accident on a harder surface, and yeah, they're absolutely gone. I can very easily see this right here breaking. You know, just kind of twisting this way, the metal would be fine, but the metal pushing against the plastic would break it off. Now, speaking of, the only metal present on these headphones is on the bridge between the headband and the cups. I think they pretty much had to do that as a bare minimum so it doesn't break automatically. Now, the pads themselves do feel really nice and plush in hand, but that really doesn't make a difference on your head, and more on that later. There are only 4 buttons on this headphone. There's volume up, volume down, the play, pause, skip, repeat button, and the power button right on the other cup. Now, I will say at least the power and connection button does feel pretty solid, but the other 3 just feel so cheap and sound really hollow. Just listen to this. Yeah, no, that's a no for me. As for Bluetooth connectivity, I will give them credit. Apple's latest chip that they put into the Beats headphones does have a pretty solid and stable connection. I mean, I've got an apartment that's, I believe, 1,200 square feet. So, you know, I leave my phone on my desk, which is what this was connected to, and I go walk around, take out the trash, pick up the laundry, items like that within the house, you know, with walls in between, and absolutely no breaking, no connection being cut whatsoever. That was pretty impressive, so I'll give them points for that. Now let's talk about comfort here. The answer to that, not really comfortable. Now they're extremely clampy and mostly unusable. Now I would say, like with other headphones, oh, just do the headphones method, stretch them out a little bit, you know, wear down the plastic a bit so they open up a little. I'd be careful with these if I were you. This is not a very robust feeling plastic, so can't guarantee they won't break on you. If you are a glasses user, you can kiss these headphones goodbye. No glasses are going to fit in between this and feel comfortable. They're just gonna squish against your head and they're gonna feel terrible. You can put them above the cup if you want, these being an on-ear headphone, but you know, it gets the job done, but it's not fantastic either. Thankfully, I don't always need to wear glasses, and I don't when doing workouts. Maybe sunglasses, but I don't work out during the day anyway, so not a big issue for me. That was not a deal breaker. Now let's talk amplification with these headphones. So in Bluetooth mode on my iPhone 13 Pro, it was a little awkward. I was balancing back and forth between a 9 and a 10, where 9 felt a little too quiet for me, and then 10 felt a little too loud. I wish there was a 9.5 or a way to divide the levels into like smaller sections, much like with the AudioTechnica M50X-BT2s. They did let you divide by 2, they let you divide by 4, so you can get a much more precise volume scaling that fits your needs the best. In wired mode, with my Lightning dongle, I rock these at about 9 to 10 out of 16. Then in wired mode, on my THX AAA 789 headphone amplifier, I rock these at about 11 on gain 1. So yeah, it's a small dynamic driver with very high sensitivity, very low impedance levels. It's gonna be relatively easy to drive. But then again, most people would be rocking these wireless anyway, so a bit irrelevant, but there you have it. Now let's go ahead and jump into the sound portion. Quick disclaimer, I will not be using EQ on these headphones whatsoever, especially since the vast majority of consumer audio products, especially Beats, typically don't know how to use EQ and typically want as smooth of an experience as possible. They don't want to go messing into the settings. They just want to buy the thing, turn it on, put it on their head, and go run a mile or something. Also, the following impressions will be with these in wireless mode. Again, most people who buy these headphones tend to want to use them in Bluetooth because of that convenience, not having to use a cable being tied down to your device or computer, but I will go over a quick comparison between wired and wireless in the notes and observation section. Now, without further ado, let's jump right in. So let's start off with the bass here. Unfortunately, there is a roll-off that occurs relatively quickly within that frequency response. Very uncharacteristic of Beats' infamous sound signature. You know, what they used to say about Beats. It's nothing but huge, bloated, muddy bass. Now it's kind of the opposite. There's practically no sub-bass and mid-bass in here. That said, while being on the weaker side, I will commend it for having a pretty flat response down there. Like, yes, there is an immediate roll-off, doesn't extend very deep in the sub-bass, but there's no real humps or dips to complain about either. So in Zealots of Stockholm by Childish Gambino, that bass note at 1:35 is just weak. It's anemic. There's no rumble to it whatsoever. It's just there. That drop at the 305 mark is present most of the time, so I'll give it that. But it really just wasn't all that exciting either. For EDM, these are definitely not the bass cannons you'd want. There's enough impact for you to listen to, you know, bass-heavy tracks comfortably, but don't expect anything past that. Now, bass guitars are actually decently represented here. Sure, they are a little more laid back, and they do fall in with the rest of the mix as opposed to standing out. I'm glad to hear that they're not bloated or muddy in any way, shape, or form. Believe me, that is a hump that Beats got over. Texture is pretty decent as well. It's acceptable for the price point even. It's not gonna blow your socks off, but at 120 bucks, wireless headphone, it's not terrible either. Now here's a pleasant surprise. In The Hammer by Deathclock, the low end is about as heavy as it should be. This track's bass and guitar is naturally thicker and tube-like. That's just the way that the track is produced. It's the way headphones should sound if you're looking for a neutral signature. And that's pretty much what you get here, just like slightly over the top, which is how the track should sound. Overall, from a neutrality standpoint, I will actually commend these for being tuned the way they are. But when it comes to technical performance in areas like sub-bass and overall clarity, they're really nothing special. Now let's jump right into the mids here. This area got shouty. Female vocals just really pop. and not in a good way. They come across very shouty. They take like 3 steps in front of the rest of the track, which just, you know, putting it in overall terms, 1, maybe 2 steps, good, clear, accurate, really in your face. 3, that's too much. I mean, yes, you get a great amount of clarity from them, but at the cost of them just drilling into your ears. Really, you want to hear the whole track and the singer's just right in front of you, like shouting in your eardrum. A great example of this, City to City by Zomboy and Bell Humble. So here I am listening to the beginning of the track. It's a surprisingly decent imaging experience. All right, you know, getting into it. And then she comes in and I'm just bombarded, and I cringed. I couldn't. Now I will say cello sounded remarkably accurate for what it is, though just a bit too nasal. I was able to pick up a good amount of texture from the string plucking, you know, the pizzicato and the bow sliding across the strings, the arco, but it wasn't amazing either. Though that being said, pretty decent for what you're getting here. In Tank by the Seatbelts, which legendary soundtrack here, the timbre in the mids does bring out the brass instruments quite well, but creates a bit of like a, and I'm sure this is the DSP doing its thing, digital sound processing. It creates a bit more of like a concert hall-like effect to them, where it sounds like they're being elevated by acoustics, not so much a natural presence. Thankfully, the sax solo wasn't really hindered by this in any way, shape, or form. It comes across as forward, but never too much in your face or too honky. So yeah, overall, not a fan of the mids. They come across as too forward, very processed in certain ways, and they definitely can come across as shouty in certain areas, much like the Apple AirPods Gen 3 did. Now, let's jump into the treble. So it's pretty peaky, especially in between the 6.2 kilohertz to 8 kilohertz range. There's another peak at around 11.5 kilohertz, and then it dies down temporarily at 14K and comes back at 16K. Unlike the bass section, the treble area is anything but flat. Even though there is a bit of a peak around the 6 to 8 kilohertz range, they're not very sibilant in this area. Don't get me wrong, there is some sizzle, but absolutely not a deal breaker. In Kyoto by Skrillex and Syra, I'm gonna have to cut that out later. Jesus. In Kyoto by Skrillex and Syra, at the 44-second mark, some of those notes do come across as shouty, really elevated, and can bother me at certain points. Same thing for the highest notes at the minute 28 mark. You know, you got the doo 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 doo, like just really high up there. And it's yikes. So there are a few areas where the treble actually takes a dip, and the listener misses out on some of those like wispy, airy nuances, stuff like in Summit by Skrillex featuring Ellie Goulding, and more on that track in a bit. Now let's talk soundstage and imaging. I'm actually surprised at the size of the soundstage, given that they're a tiny on-ear headphone that are closed back. They are a bit larger than you would expect from a headphone this size for sure. They're not, you know, HD 800 big, obviously, but they get the job done well enough to give the instruments a decent amount of space to work with and coexist peacefully enough. That being said, they don't do it perfectly and leave certain things to be desired, much like those background noises, again, in Summit by Skrillex and Ellie Goulding. Whenever the rest of the instruments come in, the background noises are close to non-existent. They go away and the background noises stand free and clear. They come back in. It's very hard to hear them. Now, I am actually impressed at how well these do imaging for what they are. Even if they're not as clear as an audiophile headphone like the HT600s or the HiFiMAN Sundaras, pick a headphone from the audiophile space, insert. What is discernible here does have that clear distinction and separation from the rest of the items in a track. Now jumping into some notes and observations here. For those interested in using these in wired mode, for some reason, I will say that using them in wireless did make a bit of a difference. It doesn't really change the sound signature of the headphone, but it does give it more energy in wireless mode. It's almost like when you put it on wireless mode, the headphone takes a single Red Bull. Like, okay, it's not exactly overloading and, you know, running around in circles, but it definitely it's a little more awake. And that's definitely the DSP doing its thing. When these are off and they're connected via wire, that digital sound processing is just leaving the drivers alone. It's just getting the charge from whatever device you have it plugged into and powering the headphones. When they're on, in wireless mode on the flip side, these are receiving their own power from the chip inside. And that DSP is active, effectively EQing the headphone closer to what the manufacturer intended for the listener. So, in a nutshell, it won't be a game-changing difference, but it is definitely noticeable. Voices get a bit more energy, the low end gets a bit more clarity and texture, and while the overall sound doesn't get clearer per se, the soundstage feels like it gets a little more room to breathe, so separation does improve a tiny bit. Now, regardless of what mode you use these on, you don't save yourself from that like typical two-dimensional Bluetooth headphone sound that comes across as like overly processed or still too compressed to compete against other Bluetooth headphones in the space, or even wired headphones. So right before we jump into the conclusion, let's talk about what the ideal gym headphone is for me in my ears. So in a workout, what I personally look for is a bit of a bass shelf going on. Just a little more elevation in the low end compared to the rest of the frequency. Not bass head heavy, but definitely a tad warmer and meatier than average because you want that extra heft and power to compensate for the activities that you'll be doing, such as, running outside with your footsteps thumping, the heavy wind, other outside noises, maybe people like in a public area. Also, you want it to help give you that extra push in your workout. That extra pump is going to help you pump and get going. You want little to no sibilance in the treble or shoutiness in the mids and highs because you want to be able to, maybe crank it up by one more level when you need that extra push, that extra motivation. It's like your last lap and you got it, you're tired, but you can get to the end and you pump it up one more level to help push you. It's kind of tough to do that when you have your eardrums being pierced, Not very enjoyable. Now that being said, let's jump into the conclusion. So, are the new-ish Beats Solo 4s a buy? Honestly, it's a no for me, dog. I've heard some great strides in Bluetooth headphones these past few years, especially in something, smaller like the Apple AirPods Pro Gen 2. I mean, these have become so popular in the audiophile headphone space for a great reason. They managed to eliminate most of that compression concern, the tech inside them works astonishingly well, and on top of that, they are really, surprisingly well tuned. As someone who never thought they would buy earphones or earbuds ever again, here I am, practically daily driving these at work and sometimes even when I'm running around doing things. And for the record, the headphones I was trying to replace are these Sony WH-CH510 that, definitely don't have a sexy name. They're not perfect, I'll give them that. They've got their own set of issues. The signature isn't all that fantastic. The clarity, I would say, honestly, it's not quite at this level, but it's very, very close. But these were $35 to $50. So they're really not perfect whatsoever. But for a gym headphone, they are much closer than what I described earlier, the ideal gym headphone. And you know what? If these break on me, if I sit on them, if something happens outside, big whoop. They were $35 to $50. Very easily replaceable. $120. They're not expensive, but it's definitely not cheap either. It would definitely, make you bite your lip. Anyways, that being said, I can't give these a pass, but I will say I am actually going to commend Beats because they are headed in the right direction when it comes to producing a quality headphone that finds the right balance between, great sound quality, great technical capabilities in terms of like the electronics inside, and has the mass appeal with the public, that brand recognition. If you can improve the clarity of the music here, of the sound, if you can find some slightly better plastic and leave them at the same price they are now, and most of all, if you can please fix those horrible dips and humps that are happening in the mid and treble section, I think people would be wearing Beats not just for the look or for the recognition, but genuinely for the audio quality. So yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much. I really hope this video helped you out here, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, ciao.